I work.
Buddy, you can just kind of outline what you're looking at for the rotation.
It's a fair question. Well, I think right now we have Freeland, Gomber, Quantrill, Feltner, Lambert, Davis, Siebold. That's 7. Those are the top guys.
Right. You're looking for a lot more depth.
Yeah, we're looking for more depth, sure. As are 29 other teams.
Is that kind of the priorities right here, just to build some depth in one way, shape?
Yes. Yeah.
And how do you feel?
Until obviously Antonio and Herman come back, which we hope, the second half at some point, and whether some of our younger pitchers pop a little early, right? Some of our younger guys who got to the AA level last year. We'll see a lot of those guys in spring training. Palmquist, Rock, amongst others.
Vanscoy, right?
Possibly, yeah. Gordon. Yeah, Tanner Gordon, Bunsoyak. Yeah, there's a few guys that we're gonna. Some of our younger pitchers.
As you look, you and Billy in the front office, scouts, as you look for potential fits via trade or waivers, whatever, are you guys looking for a certain type of pitcher?
No.
The way you used to, or
well, I don't know what that. I don't know.
Okay, it used to be there was an era where the ground ball pitcher was a really big thing for a while. And it feels like you guys
that hasn't since I've been there.
Yeah,
since I've been there, that hasn't been the case.
So you're looking for talent.
We're looking for talent, right? And I said earlier today, and I've said this, I've maintained this all along. Talented pitchers can pitch anywhere. Now, every pitcher has their style of how they get their outs, and it can come in many ways. So. With us, we have the altitude factor that comes into play. But still, if you can pitch, you can pitch. Now, we're looking for talented pitchers, whether it be a sinker baller, whether it's a high fastball pitcher, whether it's a curveball pitcher, slider, change, split, cutter. Doesn't matter. With all the, with all the data that all 30 teams have, and understand, it's a matter of getting talented players, using what we know about altitude, and combining all the factors to make good evaluations on players, our own players, and also players outside our organization.
Have you changed over the last couple of years how you view innings and how much? I know they're always valued. You're always going to be the starting pitcher,
right.
X amount. But almost a 200 inning pitcher is almost done.
Is becoming obsolete.
Yeah, and we saw the trend towards more guys, more max out for 130 innings,
sure,
40 or whatever. But have you changed anywhere what you look at for a guy who has that 160, 180?
Yeah.
Those bulk eaters, like innings eaters, what we used to call them.
Yes.
Are they almost more? Is their value changed over the last couple of years?
I've always been a proponent, and I can just harken back to my first couple of years here when we went to the playoffs. That our starting pitchers pitched innings. We had guys who logged innings. And I still think the key to a season's success is tied to starting pitching and the ability to accumulate innings out of a starting rotation. Now, the playoffs are a different animal. But I think sustained success in a regular season is you need innings out of your starters, because obviously the simple factor is you start taxing your bullpen early in the year. Then you have to go into your depth of your minor league system and more arms, and it just really gets difficult. So those starting pitchers who have the ability to, in this modern era, pitch 150 to 200 innings, I think are very, very valuable.
Is there almost a market change that you can have, say, a higher ERA and less gaudy stats if that inning pitch and you actually reward that with money? Because
Well, I don't look at it that way. I mean,
that's not your job.
yeah, but in those discussions, I'm sure in front offices and in suites here at the Opryland Hotel, they're talking about that, the value of a starting pitcher innings, and what that means to a team. And if you have that pitcher who's capable of 30-plus starts and close to 100 and close to 200 innings, that guy's a stud in this day and age.
Regardless of the results.
Well, I mean, there's usually if
Well, I mean, because if they're too bad, they're not going to get.
they're not going to get 30 starts and they're not going to get 180 innings, but there's got to be some level of performance that gets them there. And those guys are valuable. They're valuable.
I know you reflected on it probably throughout the year with all the injuries to the starting rotation. With some time away, have you thought about kind of the impact that had on the season, particularly
Yes.
the bullpen, because the bullpen
Yeah.
was so good.
Well, we lived it, so I thought about it every day, right? But the reality was, at the moment was you just keep going. You look past what happened. How are we going to win today? What do we have to do for tomorrow? All those things. I mean, but you look back and you realize the value of one of your or your best pitchers taking the ball every fifth day. I mean, there's something to that lends itself to team success. You have to have your best guys pitch, right? And I think we used 32 pitchers last year, which is I think the most in Rockies history. And as we've talked about, I mean, the guys who've been with here recently, right, with me and the team is our most successful pitching season is we've stayed relatively healthy where our best guys have taken the ball, both in the bullpen and in the rotation.
Last year, you used some openers on some occasions, and I remember with Carl Kaufman, it seemed like having someone else start the first inning kind of helped him get
Yeah.
into it. With more pitchers coming up in your system, some of those young guys that we talked about maybe in the do you make that part of the strategy, maybe use the opener a little bit more to help those, or would you rather these guys
I would
be-
rather not. I'd rather not. I'd rather not do that. But last year we felt because of the talent level that we needed to do that to give us the best chance to win that game.
But could you discuss your first base situation? You talked about Kris transitioning there,
Right.
not full time, but certainly a lot of the time. But, so first part of the question, if you can revisit why you think Kris is a good fit at first, and then discuss a little bit the competition
Yeah.
to who will back him up.
Yeah. Well, I think first base, as it relates to Kris, is sort of tied to what we do in right field as well. So I think they're tied together. And I'll say it this way: I think if you look at DH, right field, and first base, right, I think those three are all tied together. With Bryant, Blackman, Montero, Tolia, Goodman, Bouchard. Because you can say that Jones will play left, Doyle will play center. There's no need really to rotate those two guys through a DH. Built to play every day. Mid-20s, young players, everyday players. With Kris and Chuck, DH is in their game. And then the Tolia, Montero, Goodman, Bouchard combination, somewhere in there we need performance. Now there's a little bit of gap between what we project, maybe either later in the year or into 25 of. I'm getting ahead of myself. Am I answering your question, or?
Yeah, you are.
Zach Veen, Jordan Beck, Benny Montgomery, Yanquiel Fernandez, outfielders. So, as it stands now, the first part of my answer is sort of how those first base is connected to the DH and the right fielder, and that versatility. And as far as specifically to Kris can play anywhere, and he's fine playing anywhere. But, whether it's better for us to have him at first and an outfielder in right field, or the other way around.
With a year left on your deal, do you feel like some sense of urgency to? And you mentioned all those young outfielders that are in minors that might not necessarily impact the 24 roster. Do you feel like there should be a trade out there possibly to try to find to take some of the depth?
No,
of the minors?
I look at the team aspect over anything personally. So everything, that's how I feel about that. So I'm always looking at today's game, but also I think for us there's a perspective of the long-term gain too of what we need to do this year to get where we have a sustainable type of roster to compete year in, year out.
Where do you think you are with that prospect depth? Because you mentioned those guys, but also Amador and Carreras in the infield.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that gap is closing?
It's close. It's getting closer, which is a good thing, right? I mean, the last couple drafts I think have been fruitful in that regard, but time will tell on the roster. I mean, we got to see what they do on the field.
Last year you had a mix of veterans and just newbies, shall we say, on the bench. Is that your preference, or is it whoever can do the job, no matter their experience?
Well, I mean, that's I think like we've spoken to it. We have a number of guys who look to be everyday players. That there isn't, with the exception of that first base right field DH, right? Everybody else is like, they play. There's no platoon, they play. Rogers, Tovar, McMahon, Jones, Doyle, Diaz. I mean, they play. And the 5 or 6 guys I mentioned for the, those 3 other spots, I mean, that's where we are now. Unless something happens to the roster, we sign somebody or we trade for somebody. So another backup outfielder and another backup infielder are going to have to be on our team. And that's I mean, for me, more often than not, it's a role for a veteran player or a guy who's been around who understands that playing time could be limited because the guys that we have are everyday players. And it's unfair to put a young guy like Carreras as a backup infielder because we got Rogers and Tovar. So Carreras goes to the minors. Amador more than likely goes to the minors. And they play. Now, if something happens, injury or poor performance where it dictates we make a change, those guys they have their at-bats, they have their innings, they're playing, and hopefully ready to go. So I think that, there's a type of player that fits a bench role. And we're trying to, like Billy said, we're trying to upgrade that player from what we had last year.
What are the next steps, plural, for Noel Jones? I mean, he was fun to watch. He showed so much talent, potential. But he's young.
Yeah.
As you
Well,
mentioned, he's new to the
couple
outfield.
things. Yeah, I think that it starts on defense, right? I think just more polish in the outfield. I think we saw some plays that are major league quality, long-ranging routes that he made plays, and also we saw some long-ranging outs that there was a drop in there. So just ball security, right? Can't fumble. But that hopefully will come with time. But, and the reps in the outfield and there's some technique to that, right? You've heard of outfielders, the ball bouncing on them, just how they run. So there's some, there's practice there to be had to improve the, the ball security aspect, and just more comfort in the outfield by more time we play. So I think that can be improved, which it will, because he's a hard worker. On offense, like a lot of our guys, right, cut the strikeout rate down. I think the on-base percentage will be fine because he has a good eye. But with that, I think there's some aggressiveness that can come into his game earlier in the count too, right? Being selective early in the count on certain pitches, fastballs especially, that I think can enhance his game.
But as the year went on, we saw Nolan come up and be really dynamic. But Tovar was steady throughout the year. What's next for him? What do you feel that, where there is that he can grow, and where does he stand on the leadership group?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I think defensively he proved himself very, very worthy. Gold Glove finalist, all the metrics were in order, all the data solid. The baseball eye test he passed, right? Just from what we see as a defender. Made all the plays, exceptional at the ball in front of him. The charging play, turned double play fine. So just continue to just polish his defensive game, which is already, for me, above average. Offensively, young player with chase. So that will happen over time. He'll learn to lay off pitches. He'll learn to stop, as opposed to reaching for the breaking ball down and away from him. He's got power. I think the power should increase a little bit, which is not a priority, but there's going to be a home run in there. What did he end up last year with? 15 home runs as a rookie. Yeah. So there's 20 homers in there. There'll be more RBIs if he hits at the top of the order. But I think for him offensively, it's just controlling the strike zone a little bit better, taking more walks, striking out less. Pretty simple for him.
The eyes next year, you feel, that there's almost a star potential.
He's a really good player, and we guys saw it, and you guys wrote about it. He didn't get the national exposure as other players got, but what he hit, 250 something, on base 280, 290. That needs to improve. But I think for him in a year or two, I think on the national stage he'll be a guy that's talked about as a really good player. He's a future All-Star.
Okay, thanks, buddy.
Thanks,
Okay, guys.
Thanks, Joe.